So my name is Andrew Ehrman. I farm with Betsy Allister, my wife, and we've started Spring Wind Farm. We're like 2.5 miles north of Northfield. We grow about 10 acres of produce, and most all of it is sold right out of this space here in our barn. So we're just wrapping up our 11th season. We started super small, kind of right after we had graduated from college and worked on a couple farms. We just jumped right in and started with a CSA of 7 members, and we've really just kind of steadily grown that over the years and stayed in Northfield. And when we bought this land, we just bought land, so we have built the buildings, and making those infrastructure decisions is definitely like some of the hardest decisions to do for exactly that reason. Because when we put in the well, it was like our 4th or 5th year of farming. We were probably farming like 2 acres at most. We were not using the same we were using mostly T-tape at that point, and right now we've switched to mostly sprinklers. So we had a very different farm, and we really didn't know how big we were gonna get, and we've gotten bigger than I think we would have thought at that point. So, we were juggling all those decisions when we were thinking about what size well to put in, and basically ended up putting in a 5 horsepower pump, which can pump like 65 gallons per minute at about 65 PSI. It's a well with 4-inch casing, and it ended up being 360 feet. But they did know, like, if you put in a 4-inch casing, the maximum pump and gallons per minute is the 5 horsepower pump. So we were really guessing and basing it off of, like, our neighbors had a similar size pump, so that was my one piece of information that I was using. So yeah, it was probably mostly price. I remember we paid like just over $20,000, I think, 20 or 21,000 for the well and the pressure tank and everything. And that was like plumbed into our house and with a irrigation spigot that I'll show you later. And I remember the 6-inch casing was like $5,000 or $6,000 more than that. In retrospect, I probably that would have been one thing. Like, it would have been nice to have the option to go bigger, because right now we don't have an option to add more capacity unless we drill a new well. But we were just spending what we could at the time and guessing, and I don't think it's not a big deal at this point. We don't plan to grow so much more that we'll need a new well. Or at least that's my hope. I guess that would be my one bit of advice, is just like, build it as big as you financially can handle, or build it bigger than you think your farm is going to grow to, because with infrastructure that's as expensive and kind of concrete as a well, at least, I think it's better to shoot high and use a percentage of that capacity than shoot too low and be regretting it. So when we started, like I said, it was the well and then the spigot, and we were running, our fields are like 900 feet away, so with a straight line. So we were running like blue lay flat, like 900 feet to get to our fields. And we started with T-tape, and then it kind of had a hybrid system of that and sprinklers, and it really moved towards sprinklers. But the upgrade, and that system worked well for 5 years or so, but we really knew we wanted to bury the irrigation lines. So I thought about multiple ways to do that, and eventually another great resource that I've learned a lot from in my time farming around irrigation is through Roberts Irrigation, an irrigation company outside of, or in Wisconsin. And so they helped me decide what type of pipe we wanted to bury, which was super helpful because just looking at other farms and talking to people, I was thinking like, oh, I need to buy like PVC and glue it together, and I was imagining doing most of that work, including the trenching and then the plumbing and building. So it was a sizable amount of work, but also a downside of the PVC systems that I learned last year when I was thinking about upgrading is they, if water freezes in them, the PVC cracks. So you'd have to design your whole system to either gravity drain, or each year you'd have to blow it out with an air compressor. And so I was really thinking along those tracks until I spoke with Matt at Roberts Irrigation, and he was like, well, there's this other product, plastic product called HDPE, which can come in various diameters. It's what's used on a lot of like oil and gas pipelines apparently, so super high PSI, black plastic. He's like, that stuff can expand just a little bit so water can freeze in it and you don't have to drain your system each year. And the prices last year were similar to PVC, so we went with that. So it's a detail, but it was a really cool detail because the way our farm works, like I would have had to do some weird things and would have been limited if I had to have that pipe drain, because there's slope that per distance that I would have had to maintain, and our field hydrants would have been like 4 feet deep in some places, and I wouldn't have been able to take it everywhere I wanted to. So once I knew I could let water freeze in the pipe, I actually rerouted the whole system, and now it just kind of skirts our main field road, just follows our field road all the way through the farm. So the hydrants are at the edge of every field we're growing in, which was a huge benefit. And then I still have to think about the water system this time of year when stuff starts freezing, because I need to crack the valves and make sure it's winter ready, but we don't have to blow it out or drain it each time. So yeah, that was our big improvement, was just burying our main lines down to our fields. And then it limits the amount of that blue lay flat we have out at a time, limits the amount of leaks we have. So now, in terms of irrigating, the benefits are all our water's going on the field and we have a lot more pressure, so we can run a whole nother line of sprinklers. Yeah, when we started, it was all T-tape. Because at a smaller scale, I think that makes a lot of sense. Because you have a lot of control about which rows are getting water and which aren't. But over time, I just got frustrated with T-tape in terms of the actual labor of laying it out or having it blow in the wind and then having to reset it or change because of the sunlight and having to reset it each time we irrigate, or hitting it with cultivators. We don't use any black plastic, so we're cultivating all our beds. So it's very frustrating to look back and hope you're seeing a nicely cultivated field and realize that you've just torn your whole irrigation system out with the rear tine of the tractor or something. So it was mostly from that labor perspective of just how can we make this easier and have less time and have less plastic that we're having to manage or get rid of at the end of the year. So then I learned about aluminum pipe and sprinklers and really liked that system because it's durable. You're not throwing it away. It's fixable. You can weld it if it breaks. And you can just, one person can just pick up a 30-foot piece of pipe unhook it, and if you need to move it over 6 beds, you just walk it over 6 beds and drop it down. So it's easy to move it both like linearly in and out of the field, and to hop it side to side if something needs to change based on the wind or the planting. And sprinklers also just started to make more sense as we got bigger, because our fields got bigger. Like, instead of just having two rows of broccoli, now we have like 14 or 16, and that's exactly what a sprinkler system can hit. So I've kind of ended up basing our field layout and just like the size of each crop family section based on more or less what one line of sprinklers can hit. Cool. So this is kind of where our water comes out of the ground. The wellhead is 10 feet back there, so that's actually where the water's coming from. But this is the hydrant that they basically put in. If you imagine it stopping right here, those 2 pipes are the hydrant they put in when they installed the well, and they called this a curb stop. And basically what it is it's a frost-free valve 8 feet down, just like a frost-free farm hydrant is, except this is allows 2 inches of water to flow. So we're trying to keep all of our diameters at least 2 inches to maximize pressure and flow. We go back up to 3 inches here. But the way this valve works, this is actually the valve, is this pipe. So we only do this in spring and fall, but like in winter, if I wanted to turn off the water, I'm turning that, and that's closing the valve 8 or 10 feet deep so that none of this freezes. And then in spring, I'm just turning it on, and then all this is live. And it stays that way all season. We basically have 2 lines coming out of here because we have one that's just going to our high tunnels and our shop. And then this line is what's running to all of our vegetable fields. The other thing that we put in right here is a Bluetooth timer valve. So this was like $200, and you can either manually set it on here, so I could set it for any day of the week at any time to turn on for any length of time, or you can just do it manually too. This has saved us time because I can basically just turn on an irrigation for say 7 or 8 hours, set the timer, and then make sure it's working, and I don't have to turn it off basically. So it just saves that step of turning it off. But we've also used it like when we went away for the weekend and wanted to irrigate one thing down in the field and could set a timer. So that's a handy little thing. And then, so Roberts Irrigation helped us install all this. This is that black HDPE pipe that can expand a little when water freezes in it. These are air valves that let air in when the system is filling, and then once it's at pressure, they stop. This is just a pressure gauge to let us know how much pressure the whole system has. Back to this pipe, it's cool because it's super strong and high PSI. Water can freeze in it. The weird part about it though is it's fused together. So these are the joints, and that's literally just this piece of plastic melted to that piece of plastic with this tool they use that's about that big. So you have to have specialized tools in order to plumb this pipe, which you can rent, and it's not, I mean, I watched them build it, and it's something that I think a lot of people could learn with a little training. It's not too complicated. And they did tell me you can rent that equipment. So yeah, but this is where the pipe goes into the ground. It's about 2 feet deep. When we trenched it in, we didn't have to think about the rolls or how water will settle or the elevation of it. So we really just rented a standard trencher, like one of the ground chainsaw type, and just trenched in like 1,800 feet. 1,800 feet is how far this goes from here up to the farthest point in our fields. And like I said, we'll have like 6 hydrants that come up that we can show you where we pull water off of that pipe. So this is an example of one of the hydrants that we have in the field. So this is kind of where the black pipe ends, and that transitions to brass valves. So we put a T on it so that we have 2 valves and we can go either direction. And I tried to keep it below grade so that it doesn't get snagged on equipment, or we can mow over it. If a tractor wheel hits this, it's not gonna damage the irrigation, at least. So we built these boxes out of treated wood. And these are the valves that you open them and the water starts flying out. So this is where we transition to this blue lay flat. So we use a 2-inch aluminum pipe. So sometimes I'll put a valve here if I have multiple lines running off of one hydrant. But this one was the only line, so I didn't have a valve, but it's really just that 2-inch blue flexible lay flat clamped right onto 2-inch steel pipe. And then each one of these sections is 30 feet. Like you have 30-foot sections of pipe, but you can connect as many as you want together in order to match the length of your field. Different aluminum pipe has different types of latches, so you want to make sure if you're buying some, you're buying the same system as the pipe you already have, or just the same system as all the pipe together. All this pipe we bought used, and so these black gaskets were stiff, cracked, and when we started irrigating, we'd just get a lot of leaks from these all these joints. So one of the first things we do with used pipe is pull out all those black gaskets with some pliers and buy new ones to put in there. And that gasket will leak a little when the pressure is filling up, but once it's at full pressure, it seals. And then the water's coming up out of these. So yeah, sprinkler heads. This is a type of sprinkler head that we use, though I've experimented with 2 other types I can show you. It's called a Nelson Wind Fighter. I like it because it covers a good bit of distance, but it's a pretty gentle spray pattern in terms of germinating small seeded crops like lettuce and carrots. But if you leave it on long enough, you can put down a lot of water. So we've tended to go with less water output per sprinkler so that I can run more sprinklers at the same time, and then just leave it on for longer if I want to put down a lot of water. The other cool part that I like about these Nelsons is they have this piece of this transition, which transitions from just a standard 3/4-inch pipe thread to this system that just screws on and off. Whoops. Screws on and off relatively easily or quickly. And it seems like a little thing, but what happens with sprinklers I found, and the main troubleshooting when we're setting up a line to water, is you'll get a little piece of straw or grass or a small rock will clog a sprinkler. So often what we're doing to fix that is just going through and popping this off, looking in that little hole, poking out whatever is clogged and putting it back on. And because that's a task that happens relatively often, I really like these Nelsons because they're easy to unscrew and screw back on. Thanks, Natalie. These are two other examples of sprinkler heads. They both have the 3/4 inch pipe, so you can see like this would just, it just takes more effort to get that on and off. And it's harder to like unclog that hole. But these wobblers are awesome because they just put down a really even water pattern and they can operate at a low pressure. I really like this sprinkler head too.
Did you switch just because that one is easier to take on and off? It got clogged.
Switched, yeah. Like this one will throw water a little farther, and it's easier to take it on and off. Okay. But I like that these are more consistent of a pattern, I'd say, especially at lower pressure. This is a Rainbird. It's all brass. It's metal. This is what came on the pipes when we bought them because they were all used from Roberts Irrigation from a cranberry farm. These are awesome. They spray super far. They do the they can put down a lot of water and cover a lot of distance. But with used sprinkler heads, all these little springs and plastic seals, they get worn, and we'd find that they'd just get stuck and they wouldn't spin. So you'd think it was working all fine, and then you'd realize you weren't actually irrigating everything. So I think if you could buy these new, they'd be really nice, but used, I couldn't figure out a way to make them work well. So yeah.